Davis welcomes you, dear friends. I thank you for choosing to spend another quiet evening with him. I smile at how the curious Case family grows a little more each night. I gently remind anyone new to subscribe so they never miss a mystery. He leans closer, as if sharing something meant only for this moment. Tonight's quiet village hides one silent trouble. The cottage was quiet. Miss Marple liked mornings like this. Simple, predictable, safe enough to think clearly. She sat at her small table, a sewing needle in one hand, a loose button in the other. Nothing complicated, just the sort of task she preferred before the village woke. Her tea sat beside her. Steam rose in a soft curl, warm, light, comforting. She adjusted her spectacles, threaded the needle, pulled it through the buttonhole with slow, steady care. Routine work, routine morning, but her eyes moved, just once, toward the clock on the shelf. It ticked normally, steady rhythm, but wrong by 1 minute. She knew it. She checked it last night. It never drifted, not even once in years. 1 minute off. Still small, still harmless, but not normal. She watched it again. Tick, tick, tick. Same strange drift. A full 60 seconds behind. Why? She set the needle down. She lifted the clock. No crack, no dust, no strain on the hands. Battery still strong. Nothing explained the shift. She placed it back carefully. Her mind moved. Slow, logical, measured. Someone must have touched it. Only explanation. But who? No one visited last night. No one had a reason. No one touched her things. She resumed sewing. Thread, pull, tighten. But the thought stayed. Her eyes drifted next to the pile of letters on the corner of the table. Ordinary envelopes. Ordinary handwriting. Ordinary village life. Until she saw one. Just one. A small tear at the top. Barely there. Barely visible. But a tear that wasn't there yesterday. She picked it up, tilted it under the lamp. Nothing inside the envelope now. Nothing written on the outside. Just a thin rip. Precise. Careful. Intentional. Her fingers paused. Her breath paused too. Someone opened this. Someone curious. Someone cautious. Someone who wanted it back exactly where she left it. She looked at her door, still locked. She looked at her windows, still latched. She looked at her table. Nothing else out of place. But the feeling grew. Not fear, not panic. Just a thread of quiet logic. Something at the edges of routine. Something slightly crooked. Something that didn't belong in a calm cottage morning. She sipped her tea. Warm, steady, familiar. She examined the torn envelope again. She tapped it once on the table. Then she slid it under the sewing basket. Out of sight. For now, her eyes returned to the clock. 1 minute behind. Still ticking. Still wrong. She took another sip of tea. She watched the second hand pass the 12. She listened to the tiny tick echo. Through the small room, something had changed. Not loudly, not boldly, but changed all the same. She set the cup down. The morning felt unusual. The lane was quiet. Miss Marple walked with her small handbag tucked close. A simple walk, nothing dramatic, just the familiar path toward Gable House. The hedges stood still, neatly trimmed. No breeze, no sound. Only the small crunch of her shoes on the gravel. She liked this part of the village. Straight roads, predictable bends, every house in its proper place. Nothing odd, usually. Today felt slightly different. Not in the view, not in the weather, but in the tiny details she noticed without meaning to. A cat watched her from a low wall. It didn't move, not even when she passed. Just stared. She gave it a small nod, then continued. Her eyes moved along the path automatically, catching things she rarely bothered with. A loose gate hinge, a tilted garden pot, a bicycle leaning too neatly against a fence. Nothing alarming, but nothing careless either. She reached the final bend. Gable House appeared ahead. Tall, solid, usual, but something off. The front window on the left side stood open. Just a little. Barely an inch. Enough to notice. Enough to question. Miss Marple slowed. That window never opened. Not in winter. Not in spring. Not even on warm days. The latch inside was stiff. Mrs. Gable always complained about it. Yet now it sat open. A thin crack. A small shift in routine. She stopped at the gate. Looked again. Same narrow gap. Same wrong detail. She entered the garden. Simple steps. Controlled. Logical. The walkway rug at the doorstep was skewed, pulled to one side, not by wind, not by accident. Moved. Someone stepped on it, or dragged something, or left in a hurry. She bent slightly and straightened it with 2 fingers. Just a small adjustment, just enough to confirm her thought. Inside movement. Not hers. Not the house owner's. Something else. She straightened, her expression calm. Nothing revealed on her face. She knocked once. Waited. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. She tried the door. Unlocked. That was unusual. Mrs. Gable never left it unlocked. Never. Not even when expecting someone. Miss Marple stepped inside. Slow. Measured. She paused at the threshold. Looked around. Nothing chaotic. Everything neat. Same furniture. Same pictures. Same shelves. But a faint scent lingered. Not perfume. Not flowers. Something sharper. A scent that didn't belong in a quiet drawing room. She moved 1 step further. Her eyes swept the floor. Carpet smooth. Chairs aligned. Curtains even. Then she saw it. A small indentation on the armchair cushion. Fresh. Someone sat there recently. Very recently. She touched the fabric lightly. Still warm. She looked up instantly. Toward the half-open window. Then toward the hallway. Her mind lined the clues one by one. Open window. Skewed rug. Unlocked door. Warm chair. Strange scent. Nothing loud. Nothing obvious. But something real. Someone had been here. Not long ago. Not casually. Not by mistake. She turned her head slowly toward the quiet hallway. Every instinct sharpened. The house felt still. Too still. She took 1 quiet breath. They sensed someone watching. Miss Marple stood just inside the doorway. She waited a moment. The silence of the house settled around her. Still. Too still. Then footsteps approached. Light. Careful. Measured. The door to the sitting room opened. Mr. Gable appeared with a polite smile. Warm, but nervous at the edges. "Miss Marple?" he said quickly. "Such a pleasure. Truly, truly." He spoke too fast. His hands twitched once by his sides. A polite welcome pressed over something unsettled. Miss Marple nodded gently. She studied his face. He avoided her eyes. Only for a second, but long enough to register. "Thank you for coming," he added. "As you can. See, we've had a little confusion this morning." She heard the strain under the words. Not panic, not distress, just strain. Something held back. Lady Gable stepped forward next. A neat woman, composed. But her composure looked thin, like a thread pulled too tight. "Miss Marple," she said softly, "forgive the state of the house. We were not expecting visitors this early." Her voice was calm, her smile practiced, but her hands told the truth. Cold, unusually cold, even for a morning like this. Miss Marple noticed when they shook. A chill ran through Lady Gable's fingers. Cold hands meant worry or fear. Behind her, the butler entered the hallway. Petson, tall, grey hair, face unreadable. He bowed, silent, too silent. Not a greeting, not even a single polite line, just a stiff nod, and eyes that avoided everything except the floor. Miss Marple watched him move. Slow steps, stiff posture. A man who usually ran a house smoothly. Today he looked. Careful, too careful. Then the footman appeared. Young, nervous, hands trembling slightly as he carried a tray with 2 cups. He almost dropped one when he saw her. He steadied himself quickly, but she saw the shake, not clumsiness, Something else. "Morning, ma'am," he whispered, barely audible. His eyes flicked toward the staircase, then back down, as if worried someone might be watching. Miss Marple nodded gently. "Good morning." She kept her tone warm. She did not push. Not yet. Her gaze drifted to the small table near the staircase. A decorative bowl sat there. Normal, but inside it lay a single key. Large, old, out of place. Not where keys belonged. Not in this house. Mr. Gable kept everything organized. Nothing ever rested anywhere randomly, especially not keys. Miss Marple stepped closer to look. The key was polished, recently handled, placed there on purpose, or in a hurry. Both possibilities mattered. Lady Gable noticed her. Glance. She stepped forward fast. Too fast. "Oh, that," she said. "A spare. Nothing important." Her voice tightened. Just slightly. Miss Marple nodded once. She did not touch the key. She did not ask further. Not yet. Observing was enough. Mr. Gable ushered her toward the sitting room. "Please, come inside. We can talk." She walked with them. Slow, calm, observant. Every detail of the house whispered small truths. Warm welcomes on the surface, cold edges underneath. Shifting glances, hushed tones, small signs of hidden worry. She stepped into the room, sat down gently, folded her hands. Something was brewing. Quiet, tense, waiting. The house felt polite, but worried. Miss Marple sat quietly in the drawing room. She waited as the household gathered. One by one, slow steps, measured expressions. Polite smiles stretched a bit too thin. The first guest entered with a confident stride. Mr. Hollingford, tall, well-dressed, charming enough to fill the room with a warm greeting. But Miss Marple saw the truth in the details. His charm felt rehearsed. His laugh too quick. His eyes kept moving. Left, right, checking the corners, tracking every face. A man who pretended ease, but counted exits. The second guest followed. Miss Clara Brent. A quiet young woman. Hands folded tightly. Eyes lowered. Soft voice. Almost apologetic, but she watched everything under her lashes. Miss Marple noticed. Tiny looks, fast glances, taking in the room carefully, as if afraid of being seen, yet desperate not to miss a single movement. Then came the third, Mr. and Mrs. Penrose, a couple known for village gossip. Friendly smiles, warm greetings. Overly warm. Mrs. Penrose leaned forward as if sharing secrets with every sentence. Her husband nodded too quickly, too eagerly, but both avoided looking at the staircase. Miss Marple saw it. Every time the corner of the stairwell entered their sight, their faces tightened. Just slightly. Like people aware of something upstairs. Something they hoped no one else noticed. The fourth guest stepped in almost silently. Dr. Finch, a thin man with sharp eyes. A local historian. His gaze moved like a pencil sketching lines. Precise. Focused. He barely blinked. He lingered by the mantelpiece, not to admire it, but to study the small objects arranged neatly there. A framed photograph, a brass paperweight, a matchbox. He lifted the matchbox, weighed it gently, returned it without expression. A man searching for patterns, or confirming one. Miss Marple filed it away. Useful later. The fifth arrival was late. The footman announced her with a hesitant tone. Miss Lydia Shaw, a distant cousin to the Gables. She breezed in with a confident smile, too bright, too polished. Her perfume lingered a bit too strongly, covering something. Maybe nerves, maybe guilt, maybe both. She greeted everyone with equal cheer. But when Lady Gable's back turned, Miss Shaw's smile faded fast. Her jaw tightened, her fingers curled slightly, a mask slipping for just a moment. Miss Marple noted it. Nothing erased once observed. The room settled into an uneasy circle. Guests in polite poses. Teacups raised. Small talk drifting. But the glances told the truth. Mr. Hollingford watched. Dr. Finch. Dr. Finch watched the Penroses. The Penroses watched Miss Shaw. Miss Shaw watched the staircase. Miss Clara watched everyone. Miss Marple sat still, folded hands, quiet mind, sharp eyes. She didn't interrupt. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. People revealed more in silence. The group shifted ever so slightly, each guarding something, each hiding something, each studying the others with careful caution. The room felt polite, but tense. Soft smiles, tight fingers, shallow breaths. Miss Marple let the silence stretch. It spoke louder than words. No one seemed fully honest. The drawing room held its uneasy, calm. Guests murmured softly. Teacups clinked. Small talk drifted around the carpet like harmless dust. But Miss Marple watched the space between the words. She held her saucer carefully, listened, waited. Then it happened. A small sound, barely a tap, but enough. Something dropped. Miss Clara Brent gasped softly as a small silver brooch slipped from her sleeve. It hit the rug with a sharp, lonely click. Not loud, not dramatic, but unusual. Miss Marple looked up instantly. So did everyone else. Miss Clara bent down quickly, too quickly. Her fingers shook as she grabbed the brooch. She tucked it into her pocket. No explanation, no apology, just a forced smile. Just clumsy, she whispered. But she wasn't clumsy. Not earlier. Not ever. Her careful posture contradicted the excuse. Miss Marple stored the thought quietly. Before anyone could settle again, another sound cut through the room. A door rattled. A firm rattle. Sudden. Sharp. The hallway door. The one leading toward the back of the house. Mr. Gable stiffened. Lady Gable flinched. The footman froze mid-step. Only one person reacted with too much force. Miss Lydia Shaw turned so fast her chair scraped. Her eyes shot to the rattling door. Wide. Alert. Shaken. She tried to mask it with a sip of tea, but her hand trembled. The cup rattled against the saucer. Miss Marple didn't miss it. Neither did Dr. Finch. He observed her reaction like a scientist noting a result. Mr. Hollingford cleared his throat. "Old houses," he said lightly. "They shift. Doors move. Nothing odd." But he didn't believe his own line. Not fully. His eyes lingered on the hallway longer than needed. The footman stepped toward the door slowly. He hesitated, swallowed, placed his hand on the handle, turned it gently. Miss Marple watched every detail. The boy's nervous posture, Lady Gable's shallow breaths, Miss Shaw's tight grip on her cup, Mr. Gable wiping his hands on. His trousers once, then again. The door opened. Nothing behind it. Just a quiet corridor. Still, empty. The footman stepped back quickly. Too quickly. He closed the door with a soft click. The guests shifted in their seats. Small movements. Short glances. No one spoke. Miss Marple leaned back slightly. Her mind arranged the two events like puzzle pieces placed on a table. A dropped brooch, hidden in a sleeve before falling. Strange place to hide it. A rattling door. Not wind, not accident. Someone touched it, or tried to leave, or tried to listen. Small things. Both small. But small things mattered. Miss Shaw's reaction. Too sharp, too immediate. Miss Clara's brooch. Too quickly concealed, too quickly claimed as clumsy. Miss Marple folded her hands. Calm. Still. Fully alert. The room pretended to relax. But tension lingered under every surface, like threads pulled tight under a blanket. Guests resumed talking softly. Forced. Thin. Uneasy. Miss Marple watched them with patient eyes. She didn't interrupt. She didn't comment. She didn't need to. 2 incidents. Both quiet. Both small. Both wrong. She lifted her teacup. Something small, but wrong. The drawing room settled again. Or pretended to. Miss Marple sensed the tension shifting from one corner of the room to another. Small movements. Soft breaths. Uneasy silence. Then the footman returned. Quiet steps. A folded slip of paper on a small silver tray. He held it awkwardly, as if unsure who should receive it. He stopped by Lady Gable first. "Madam," he whispered. "A note. Left at the back door." Lady Gable froze. Her fingers tightened on the armrest. Her breath caught for a moment. Barely noticeable, but Miss Marple saw it. "A note?" Lady Gable asked, her voice thin, barely steady. "Yes, madam," the footman said. "No one there when I looked." Lady Gable hesitated. Then she lifted the paper with careful fingers. Her eyes flicked toward the window, a single glance, as if checking for someone outside. Miss Marple watched her open the note, slow, reluctant, afraid of the message before even reading it. The handwriting was elegant, smooth ink strokes, sharp endings, a practiced hand. Lady Gable read the words once, then again. Her face drained, color slipped away. Panic pressed through her polite mask, soft but real. Mr. Gable leaned toward her. "What is it?" he whispered. He reached for the paper. She pulled it back instantly. Too fast. Too protective. "No," she said quietly. Her voice shook. "It's nothing." Miss Marple looked at the note from where she... Saturday. Just a glimpse, but enough to catch the tail end of one line. 4 words. Dark ink. Clear letters. It cannot stay buried. Lady Gable folded the note quickly. Her hands trembled. Then she tucked it deep into her sleeve, far deeper than needed. Miss Marple stored that detail. Mr. Hollingford raised an eyebrow. What sort of message was that? He tried to keep his tone light, but his curiosity sharpened the air. Lady Gable forced a smile. A small matter. Nothing more. She lied. Poorly. Her voice strained, her eyes glassy. Miss Shaw leaned forward. "Are you sure?" Her tone was too eager, too alert. She wanted the content of that note. Desperately. "Doctor?" Finch watched silently from the mantelpiece. His gaze fixed on Lady Gable's sleeve. He saw where she hid it. Everyone did. Miss Clara looked frightened. Her hands tightened in her lap, like someone who knew more than she wanted to admit. Mr. Gable placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," she whispered. Then louder. "No, not now." She glanced around the room, every guest watching, every ear listening, every breath held. "Please," she said, "let's keep this quiet, for now." Her voice cracked on the last word. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. She didn't interrupt, but the thought arranged itself clearly in her mind. A secret message, elegant handwriting, a warning. Lady Gable terrified, everyone else pretending calm. Miss Marple folded her hands gently. This note was not a beginning, it was a continuation. Something old, something known, something someone feared. The guests pretended to resume their small talk, but no one focused. Eyes drifted to Lady Gable's sleeve, then to the windows, then to the quiet hallway. The house held its breath. Something was moving beneath the surface. Not loudly, not openly, but deeply. Miss Marple looked at Lady Gable again. The woman was shaking, inside, behind the smile, behind the polite posture. The note meant something heavy, something dangerous. Something was buried, and someone feared its return. The drawing room softened again. Voices lowered, movements slowed, but tension clung to every corner. Miss Marple waited until the guests drifted toward the windows and side tables. Small groups formed. Thin smiles returned. No one relaxed fully. She stood and approached Lady Gable with gentle steps. Nothing intrusive, nothing sharp, just polite concern. "Are you all right, my dear?" Miss Marple asked. Soft tone, steady voice. Lady Gable stiffened. "Perfectly fine," she replied quickly. Too quickly. She smoothed her skirt as if hiding tremors. Her eyes refused to settle on Miss Marple's. Miss Marple nodded kindly. "I wondered," she said, "if the note mentioned something from before." Lady Gable blinked. Once. Slowly. Her smile faltered for half a second before she forced it back. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice thin, her hands twisting the handkerchief in her lap. Miss Marple kept her tone gentle. Old matters have a way of returning, she said, especially those handled quietly. Lady Gable looked away. Her eyes drifted toward the far wall. Then toward the hallway. Then toward the locked cabinet near the piano. A small truth slipped through the silence. "It was a long time ago," she whispered, barely audible, barely controlled. Miss Marple caught the tremor in her voice, a line spoken unconsciously, not planned, not guarded. Before Miss Marple could respond, footsteps approached. Light, quick. Miss Clara Brent stood near the doorway. She pretended to examine a vase, but she wasn't looking at it. She was listening. Miss Marple saw her shoulders tense, ears angled toward the conversation, eyes fixed on the reflection in the vase's glass surface. Lady Gable noticed too late. She clamped her lips shut. Her posture snapped straight. She tried to erase what she had revealed. Miss Marple continued gently. "Sometimes," she said, "old things leave marks. Houses remember. People remember." Lady Gable's hands shook once more. She pressed them tightly together to hide it. "We don't talk about the past," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Not here." Miss Marple leaned back slightly. She didn't push further, not directly. "Of course," she said. "One only asks when the present seems unsettled." Lady Gable looked up sharply, a flash of something behind her eyes. Fear, regret, recognition. "You mustn't say anything," Lady Gable murmured. Her voice trembled. "Please." Miss Marple nodded. A simple nod, not agreement, not refusal, just acknowledgement. But Miss Clara heard enough. She stepped away quickly, too quickly. Her shoes scraped the wooden floor. A small sound, but enough to break the moment. Lady Gable turned. Her face tightened. Colour drained again. "Oh dear," she whispered. She heard. Miss Marple followed her gaze. Miss Clara paused at the foot of the stairs, one hand on the railing, her eyes wide, her breath unsteady. She whispered something under her breath, just a single word, barely shaped, barely formed. A name. Miss Marple leaned forward slightly, trying to hear, trying to catch the sound. Miss Clara whispered it again. Soft, shaken. A name tied to the past. A name meant to stay buried. Then she stopped herself, cut the word short, turned away, hurried upstairs. Miss Marple stood still. Her mind set the pieces down in a careful row. A name was whispered, then cut short. Miss Marple stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The drawing room held too many eyes, too many half-truths. The garden offered clearer thinking. The air felt still, cold, but not unpleasant, the kind of stillness that sharpened observation. Gable House's garden was simple, neat paths, trimmed edges, nothing extravagant. She walked slowly along the stone path. Her shoes pressed small marks into the frost. She glanced at each stone in turn. One by one, she saw it immediately. A stone slightly out of alignment. Not loose, just shifted. The angle wrong by a fraction. Barely. Noticeable. But wrong. She paused, bent slightly, ran a finger along the crack at the edge. Fresh soil pressed upward. A thin line of disturbed earth. Someone had stepped hard. Or moved something. She straightened. Her eyes moved to the ivy-covered wall at the side of the garden. Thick ivy. Older than most shrubs in the village. But today a portion sagged oddly. Pushed aside. Not by wind. Not by time. She approached it. Lifted the ivy gently. Her fingers brushed something cool beneath the leaves. A chain. Thin. Delicate. She pulled it forward with care. A locket. Small. Silver. Not old enough to be antique. Not new enough to be accidental. She opened it. Empty. No photograph. No inscription. But faint marks of something once held inside. She closed it. Studied it again. Someone dropped it. Or hid it. Or lost it while rushing through the garden. Her mind moved through the list of guests. Who wore jewelry? Who touched their neck nervously earlier? Who avoided the garden view when the curtains shifted? Several names fit, none obvious. She placed the locket in her handkerchief, folded it neatly, tucked it into her pocket. Her eyes returned to the misaligned stone. She crouched, pressed it lightly. It shifted under her touch, not loose enough to fall apart, but loose enough to suggest someone lifted it recently. She brushed her hand across the soil. Cold, damp, disturbed. A shallow scrape line crossed the dirt. Straight, intentional, the kind left by a tool. A narrow one, maybe a trowel, maybe something improvised. Miss Marple frowned softly. Someone worked here. Not days ago, not last week, recently. Before she could examine further, a voice startled the quiet. "Miss Marple?" The footman stood at the door, too fast, too out of breath, his eyes wide, his posture stiff. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, the words polite, but the tone tight. Miss Marple turned slowly. "Just a walk," she said gently. He nodded too quickly. "Dinner preparations soon, ma'am. We prefer guests inside." Prefer. Not require. Not request. Prefer. Strange choice of word. Strange fear beneath it. She stepped away from the stone, away from the ivy. She walked back toward the house calmly. The footman watched every step. She glanced once more at the garden, at the shifted stone, at the disturbed earth, at the sagging ivy. Her mind filed the details in a neat row. A hidden locket, fresh soil, a scraped mark, a footman too quick to intervene. Someone had been digging recently. The lunch table looked calm enough, plates arranged neatly, cups lined in careful rows, silverware polished, everything prepared for a normal meal. But nothing felt normal. Miss Marple took her seat quietly. Her eyes moved across the guests. Each carried their own tension. Small, controlled, but visible to anyone patient enough to look. Lady Gable poured tea with a shaky hand. The cup rattled once on its saucer. She forced a smile. "Do enjoy," she whispered. Mr. Hollingford sat too straight, his posture rigid. He checked the doorway twice, then the windows, then the hallway. His fingers tapped the table, a fast pattern, a nervous rhythm. Miss Clara Brent barely touched her plate. She held her fork tightly, knuckles pale, eyes darting. She glanced at Miss Shaw every few seconds, fear in each glance, fear or recognition. Mrs. Penrose tried to speak, a polite story, something harmless about flowers, but her voice wobbled. Her husband's eyes kept drifting toward the staircase. He nearly flinched when a floorboard creaked somewhere above. Dr. Finch ate slowly, very slowly, too slowly, not tasting anything. Just thinking, watching, measuring reactions like a scientist with a silent clipboard. Miss Shaw was the only one who appeared calm, too calm. She smiled easily, spoke gently, laughed once. But her laughter didn't match her eyes. Her eyes scanned every plate, every hand, every movement. Miss Marple saw it all, quietly, without comment. Then the moment broke. Miss Clara gasped. Her fork slipped from her hand. She grabbed the edge of the table, her breath short and tight, her face pale. Everyone froze. "Are you all right?" Lady Gable asked. Too quick, too anxious. Miss Clara nodded. A lie. She struggled to catch her breath. Her eyes fixed on something across the table. Miss Marple followed her gaze. The small silver brooch Miss Clara had dropped earlier was gone. Not on her sleeve. Not on the table. Not in her lap. Missing. Again. Miss Marple scanned the room. Mr. Hollingford's hand hovered near his pocket. Dr. Finch looked away too slowly. Miss Shaw smiled without looking concerned. Mrs. Penrose stared at her own hands, pretending she saw nothing. But Miss Marple saw one more detail. Miss Clara wasn't panicking because she lost the brooch. She was panicking because she saw who took it. The meal continued awkwardly. Guests forced small bites, forced small smiles. Everything stiff, everything thin. Lady Gable tried to lighten the mood. "Perhaps some lemon tart?" Her voice trembled. She failed to hide it. Miss Shaw nodded quickly. "Lovely idea," she said. but her hand slid under the table. A small movement, too subtle for most. Not subtle enough for Miss Marple. Mr. Hollingford stood to adjust his chair. He knocked a spoon off the table. A clumsy moment. Except he wasn't clumsy. Not earlier. Not ever. The sound gave cover for something else. Something pocketed. Something hidden. Miss Marple watched the room settle again. Unfinished bites. Uneasy breaths. Unspoken fear. Someone had taken the brooch. Someone had watched Miss Clara panic. Someone knew exactly what that brooch meant. Miss Clara lowered her gaze. Her fingers trembled again. A truth pressed at the edge of her memory. Trying to surface. Trying to speak. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. She saw it. The moment recognition flickered in Miss Clara's eyes. She remembered something important. Miss Marple stepped into the small morning room. Quiet space. Closed door. A place where thoughts settled into neat order. Mr. Gable followed, more slowly. He shut the door behind them, his face strained, his posture tight. A man under pressure. Miss Marple remained calm. She took a seat by the small writing desk. Hands folded, mind ready. "Mr. Gable," she began softly. "I wonder if we might review the morning." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I suppose we should." His voice lacked confidence. His eyes drifted toward the hallway, as if fearing someone might overhear. Miss Marple started simply. "The brooch," she said. "The rattling door. The note. Miss Clara's panic. The missing item at lunch." He exhaled sharply. "All accidents," he muttered, but his tone betrayed doubt. She listed calmly. 1. Guest hides a brooch. 1 reacts too fast to a door. 1 has cold hands and fear in her eyes. 1 listens at the stairwell. 1 watches everyone but pretends not to. 1 studies objects, not people. And 1 smiles too easily. Mr. Gable blinked. "It sounds worse when you say it aloud." "It is worse," Miss Marple replied gently. He rubbed his forehead. "We didn't expect all this. Yet it came," she said. "And it came for a reason." She shifted slightly. "Now, about the house itself." He stiffened again. "There was a stone disturbed in the garden," she continued, "and the ivy pushed aside. Someone dug. Recently." Mr. Gable looked down, silent, trapped by truth he couldn't hide. "I don't know who," he whispered. "Truly." Miss Marple nodded once. She didn't press him. Not yet. She removed a small folded paper from her pocket. A letter torn at the edge. The one from her own cottage. Mr. Gable's eyebrows lifted. "What is that?" "A letter someone opened at my home," Miss Marple said calmly. "Someone careful enough to leave only a thin tear. Someone searching." He looked alarmed now. "Searching for what?" "That is the question," she replied. She placed another clue on the desk. A small scrap of fabric, caught on a nail by the back staircase earlier. She had removed it quietly, before anyone noticed. Mr. Gable lifted it with trembling fingers. "This is silk. Fine silk." "Miss Shaw's dress material," Miss Marple said. He swallowed hard. "You're certain?" "I am." Another piece slid into place. Mr. Gable paced the room once, then again, his steps uneven. Miss Marple added the final point. "There is also a forced lock," she said. "On the small cabinet in the music room, barely visible, fresh damage. Someone wanted what was inside." Mr. Gable froze. That detail struck him deeper than the rest. "That cabinet holds old papers," he whispered. "Nothing valuable, nothing anyone should care about." "Old papers matter," Miss Marple said, "especially when someone believes they hold answers, or danger." She watched him closely. "Mr. Gable," she said softly. "When secrets move, they move because someone pushes them. This house carries weight from the past, and someone is trying to unearth it." He sank into a chair, hands over his face, fear finally visible. Miss Marple sat calmly, her mind placing every clue into a row, every reaction, every slip, every hidden fear. The note, the garden, the brooch, the missing item, the overheard whisper, The silk fabric, the forced lock, a pattern, subtle, layered, growing clearer. She breathed once, slow, certain. The secret had layers. The house settled under evening silence. Soft lamps dimmed, doors closed gently. Guests retreated to their rooms with strained politeness. Miss Marple stayed awake. She sat in the small guest chair, beside the window. Hands folded, eyes half closed, listening. The house spoke differently at night. Fewer voices, more truth. Walls no longer busy with daytime noise. Then it began. A soft footstep, light, cautious. Somewhere on the landing outside her room. Miss Marple opened her eyes. She did not move. Stillness helped more than interruption. Another step followed. Closer this time, measured, slow. Someone choosing each board carefully. She waited. The footsteps paused near her door. A faint shift. Weight leaning. Someone listening. Then a breath. So soft it barely disturbed the air. But real. Miss Marple remained still. She knew better than to reveal attention too soon. The breathing stopped. The person moved again. Quiet steps. Heading toward the far end of the corridor. Miss Marple counted the distance by sound. One board creaked, then another, then silence. She rose from her chair. Gentle movements. She opened her door an inch. Enough to see. Not enough to reveal. A shadow moved at the far end of the hall. Tall, thin, steady pace. Not hurried, not panicked. Someone who believed they knew the house well. The shadow reached the staircase. Paused. Looked back. Miss Marple froze behind the crack. Then the figure descended. Each step controlled. Not one misstep. A practiced walk. Miss Marple followed, silent. She knew the boards that stayed quiet. Years of village visits taught her many useful paths. She stopped halfway down. The figure reached the lower hall. A door creaked. Soft. Old hinges. Not forced. Pulled open slowly. Miss Marple recognized the sound. The small study near the garden door. She stepped down one more stair. Her angle allowed a clear view of the study doorway. Light flickered inside. A candle or small lamp. Someone whispered. A second voice answered. Miss Marple stiffened. Two people, not one. She leaned slightly forward, keeping her shadow hidden. The first voice was tense. Low. Urgent. "We shouldn't wait any more," it said. "We're running out of time." The second voice hissed back. "We move when I say. Not before." Miss Marple heard fabric rustle. Something placed on a desk. A paper, maybe. Or a map. Or the mysterious note's twin. The first voice spoke again. "They'll find out. Someone already suspects." A pause. Heavy. Sharp. Miss Marple strained to hear. The second voice spoke slowly. "Then we deal with it. If the past comes back, we silence it." Silence filled the doorway for a moment. Then steps shifted. A chair scraped. Someone stood. Miss Marple pulled back instantly. She retreated 3 steps up the staircase. She kept her breath quiet. She watched the bottom of the stairs. The shadow moved again. One person left the study first, then another. Both walked toward the back of the house, toward the garden door, where the disturbed earth waited. Miss Marple remained still, calm, thoughtful. 2 people involved. 2 agendas. 2 secrets tied to the same buried truth. She stepped back and closed her door quietly. Her mind arranged every detail from tonight. Footsteps, whispers, conflict, threat. Not one person acting alone. They were not alone. Morning light crept through the narrow guest window. Miss Marple rose quietly. No rush. Her mind already placing the night's whispers into order. She stepped into the corridor. Calm steps. Still house. Too still. As she reached the landing, she paused. Something on the small side table caught her eye. A handkerchief, neatly folded. White linen. Embroidery at one corner. Not hers. Not from her room. And certainly not placed there yesterday. She picked it up. Light fabric. Clean, but faint traces of soil along one edge. Garden soil. Fresh. She checked the embroidery, a single initial sewn neatly. L. Miss Lydia Shaw. Miss Marple turned the cloth over once. Someone dropped it, or placed it, or wanted it found. She folded it carefully and slipped it into her sleeve. She continued toward the morning room. But before she reached the door, another detail stopped her. The cabinet at the end of the hall. Yesterday closed. Locked. Today, slightly open. Barely half an inch. But enough. Miss Marple opened it slowly. Inside, papers lay scattered. Not wildly, just disturbed. Someone sorted through them. Purposefully. Quietly. She pulled one paper out, an old diary page, yellowed edges, handwriting neat and steady. A date circled in red ink. Many years ago. A single line beneath it read, "The truth cannot stay hidden." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. Same message as the note. Same theme. Different hand. She folded the page softly. Before she could slip it away, footsteps echoed from the far side of the hall. Fast. Approaching too quickly. Miss Marple closed the cabinet half a second before Miss Shaw appeared at the corner. Miss Shaw stopped sharply. Her breath caught. Her eyes darted to the cabinet, then to Miss Marple's hands, then back to the cabinet. Miss Marple smiled gently. "Good morning, my dear." Miss Shaw's smile came too late, too forced, too brittle. "Oh, good morning," she managed. Her gaze stayed glued to the cabinet door. Her fingers twitched once, a tell she didn't mean to show. "Did you sleep well?" Miss Marple asked. Miss Shaw nodded too fast. "Yes, perfectly. Lovely house. Very peaceful." Her words trembled on the last syllable. Miss Marple stepped aside politely to let her pass. Miss Shaw hovered a moment. Hovering was guilt, or fear, or both. Then Miss Shaw reached for the cabinet, slowly, pretending she had a reason. Her hand froze when she felt Miss Marple's calm eyes on her. "Oh, I was just looking for—" Her voice collapsed before she found a lie. She backed away quickly, too quickly, nearly tripping as she turned the corner. Miss Marple waited until the sound of her steps disappeared. Then she reopened the cabinet. She scanned the inside again. More pages missing. More marks of quiet searching. Someone had come here in the night. Someone wanted the past uncovered. Someone else wanted it destroyed. She felt the threads pulling together, slowly, diffusely, but toward the same knot. The handkerchief, the soil, the old diary entry, the forced cabinet. Miss Shaw's fear. The night whispers. Miss Marple closed the cabinet silently. The pattern was tightening. The drawing room felt heavier than before. Chairs in a neat circle. Cups untouched. Eyes refusing to settle. Miss Marple entered quietly. The guests were already gathered. Every face tight, every posture stiff. Mr. Gable cleared his throat. "We should discuss matters openly," he said. The words wobbled. His courage thinner than he hoped. Silence followed. A long one. Everyone waited for someone else to speak first. Then Miss Shaw broke it, her voice sharp. "Someone keeps going through the house at night." She looked around quickly, accusing no one directly, accusing everyone at once. Mrs. Penrose gasped. "That's outrageous," she said. But her eyes flew to her husband before anyone else. Too fast, too familiar with guilt. Mr. Penrose avoided her gaze, avoided everyone. He stared at the rug as if hoping it would swallow him. "Mr." Hollingford leaned forward with dramatic calm. "Perhaps we should ask who has something to hide." His eyes landed squarely on Miss Clara Brent. Miss Clara flinched. Her breath stuttered. Her hands clasped in her lap. She shook her head. "I haven't done anything," she whispered. But it was the whisper of someone already cornered by memories, not actions. Dr. Finch stepped in, his tone cold. "Then explain the brooch." He folded his arms. "Explain why it keeps moving." Miss Clara froze. Her eyes widened. She swallowed hard. I I don't know, she said, but the denial lacked strength. Lady Gable suddenly stood, too quickly. Her chair scraped loudly. She clutched her sleeve where the secret note still hid. No more questions, she said, her voice sharp, controlled fear beneath it. Miss Marple watched the gesture, watched the fear, watched the desperation hiding behind trembling fingers. Mr. Hollingford rose next. Lady Gable, he said softly. What did that note say? Polite words, not a polite tone. The push behind them was intentional. Lady Gable's face drained. She looked at her husband, then at the cabinet across the room, then at Miss Marple. I can't, she said, barely a whisper. Miss Shaw stepped forward. She pointed, not at Lady Gable, but at Mr. Hollingford. You were out of your room last night, she said, her voice steady now, stronger, accusatory. I saw your shadow in the hall. Mr. Hollingford stiffened. That wasn't me. His response too quick, too sharp, too defensive. Dr. Finch narrowed his eyes. You're lying. Mr. Hollingford's jaw tightened. The flicker appeared. Right there. A flash in his eyes. Fear. Then anger. Then fear again. He looked away. It was enough. Miss Marple watched everyone shift. Everyone fracture. Everyone reveal pieces they had hoped to hide. The room filled with muttered accusations. Half sentences. Shallow denials. False starts. Mrs. Penrose cried quietly. Mr. Penrose whispered fiercely at her to stop. Miss Shaw paced like a restless fox. Mr. Hollingford clenched his fists. Dr. Finch stood completely still, studying everyone. Miss Clara trembled. Lady Gable pressed a shaking hand against her heart. Miss Marple raised her hand gently. The room hushed. She looked around slowly. Calm gaze. Steady breath. This house, she said softly, has carried secrets for too long. Everyone stared at her. No one breathed. And secrets, she continued, do not stay quiet forever. Her eyes moved from face to face, not accusing, not condemning, just placing each person under gentle truth. It is time, she said, for the truth to decide who speaks first. A deep silence followed. Heavy. Ungiving. Someone would break. Someone would reveal. Someone knew too much to stay quiet. Miss Marple waited. It was time for truth. To walk out. The drawing room held its breath. Everyone watched Miss Marple. Everyone waited. She stepped to the center of the room. Calm, measured, nothing dramatic. Just the quiet certainty of someone who finally saw the pattern clearly. Let us begin, she said gently. Mr. Hollingford crossed his arms. Miss Shaw gripped the back of a chair. Miss Clara held herself still. The Penroses clung to each other. Lady Gable trembled behind her husband. Miss Marple spoke softly. First, she said, the brooch. It fell twice, not by accident. It was used as a signal, a reminder of something hidden. Miss Clara knew that. Her reaction revealed more than she meant. Miss Clara gasped. Her eyes lowered, but she didn't deny it. Miss Marple continued. Second, the rattling door, not the wind. Someone listening. Someone moving through the house at night. Someone who knew which boards creaked and which did not. Her gaze moved to Mr. Hollingford. He stiffened again, but she did not accuse him. Third, the garden. Fresh soil. Shifted stone. A locket hidden then forgotten in a rush. That was no accident. That was fear. Miss Shaw swallowed hard. Her eyes flickered. Fourth, the forced cabinet, Miss Marple said. Someone needed old papers. Someone believed they proved something. Something dangerous. Something that could change fortunes. Mr. Gable turned pale. Lady Gable looked away quickly. And fifth, Miss Marple added. The note. Elegant handwriting. A warning. It was not sent to frighten. It was sent to remind. The past was no longer contained. She let that settle. Then she drew the threads together. This house once belonged to another branch of the Gable family. Generations back. A dispute occurred. A missing inheritance. A claim buried, but not forgotten. She lifted the torn diary page from her pocket. This page, she said, speaks of that dispute. It hints at a missing heir, someone who left the village, someone erased from records. Lady Gable closed her eyes. Tears gathered. She whispered, "We tried to protect the house." Miss Marple nodded. "Yes, but someone else tried to reclaim it." Her gaze traveled to Miss Shaw. Miss Shaw's composure cracked. Her breath hitched. Her fingers trembled. "You came here with purpose," Miss Marple said softly. "You knew the diary existed. You knew the papers might prove your claim. You searched at night. You dug in the garden to find the locket holding the old family crest, a crest linking you to the lost branch." Miss Shaw shook, her head once, twice, then stopped. The truth pressed too strongly. Mr. Hollingford stepped forward as if to defend her, but Miss Marple raised a calm hand. "You helped her," she said. "Not out of guilt, out of loyalty." Mr. Hollingford froze, caught without a word. Miss Marple turned back to Miss Shaw. "You were close," she said gently, "but fear clouded your path. Fear made you rush. Fear made you careless." Miss Shaw's voice broke. "I only wanted what belonged to my grandmother," she whispered. "She was cast out, left with nothing. We never forgot." Mr. Gable collapsed into a chair. Lady Gable wept quietly. The Penroses stared in shock. "Dr." Finch nodded slowly, recognizing the logic he missed. Miss Marple closed the diary page. "The truth is painful," she said softly, "but truth clears shadows, and this house had many." The tension drained from the room, slowly, gently, like a long-held breath finally released. The manner finally exhaled. But one question remained. The police arrived within the hour. Quiet steps, low voices, a calm authority that steadied the shaken house. Inspector Rowley listened to Miss Marple patiently. He asked precise questions. He took brief notes. He spoke with Miss Shaw and Mr. Hollingford separately. No raised voices, no dramatic displays. Just the slow, steady work of officials handling old wounds. Miss Shaw remained composed. She answered each question carefully. Her voice stayed even. Relief and fear mixed together. Mr. Hollingford stood close, offering silent support. The Gables sat together on the small sofa. Lady Gable's hand rested on her husband's arm, a gesture of apology and exhaustion. They spoke softly with the inspector, explaining the old family dispute, the lost branch, the missing heir, the diary entries long ignored. The inspector nodded through it, understanding, not judging, simply acknowledging a history finally uncovered. When the formal questions ended, the house loosened slightly, not fully, but enough to breathe again. Miss Marple moved to the sideboard for a cup of tea, her hands steady, her thoughts aligned. A moment of warmth restored balance. Miss Clara approached her first. Quiet steps, eyes lowered. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing what I could not." Miss Marple smiled gently. "You remembered what mattered," she said, "and that helped more than you know." Miss Clara nodded once, not fully reassured but lighter than before. Mr. Penrose wandered over next. He looked embarrassed, almost shy. "We made things worse by pretending nothing was wrong," he said. "Silence often does," Miss Marple replied, "but speaking now helps." He managed a small smile, a man learning from the day. Mrs. Penrose joined him, her face still pale, but her voice steadier. "This house needed truth," she said, "and you guided it out." Miss Marple gave a small nod. Truth, once moving, rarely stopped. Lady Gable approached last, eyes red, hands shaking, but her spine straighter than it had been all day. "I never meant to hide anything," she said softly. "We only feared more loss. We thought forgetting would protect us." Miss Marple touched her arm gently. "Protection and concealment are rarely the same," she said. Lady Gable breathed out, slow, relieved. "Perhaps now," she whispered, "the house can rest again." The inspector returned briefly. "All matters will be reviewed properly," he said, "but nothing here looks malicious. Just tangled. A fair word. Miss Marple agreed silently. The police stepped out into the evening air. Their car rolled down the gravel path. Its sound faded. The house grew quiet again. A natural quiet this time. Guests drifted into small conversations. Low voices, soft reflections, gratitude, regret, understanding. Each person processing the long day. Miss Marple walked to the window. She watched the garden, the ivy, the disturbed soil, the path leading back to calm. The manor felt lighter, not free of history, but free of fear. A soft, emotional truth settled in her mind. Some houses heal only when the truth is spoken. She sipped her tea, warm, steady, restorative, but as she set the cup down, her eyes narrowed slightly. One small detail, one quiet clue from earlier, something she hadn't placed yet. The house breathed calmly, guests relaxed, tension eased, yet one detail still felt unsettled. Davis returns in the morning calm. He speaks softly, as if the house itself is still waking. A fresh cup of tea sits beside him. Steam rises in slow curls. Simple, steady, comforting. He looks toward his listeners with quiet gratitude. These moments, he says gently, remind us how easily truth slips into shadows, not out of malice, but out of fear. Families hide things. Villages hide things. Even hearts hide things. He lifts his cup slightly, lets the warmth settle around the words. But sooner or later, truth stirs. It nudges. It taps on the door. And when it finally steps forward, we see that honesty hurts less than silence. He smiles softly. Tonight Gable House found its voice again. Old wounds breathed. Hidden stories rose. And people finally saw one another clearly. A pause. Warm. Human. That's why we say, truth cools slower than tea. He sets the cup down. The steam thins. The room feels gentle. Safe again. Davis lowers his voice for the final note. Rest well, dear friends. Let the calm settle around you. But keep your eyes open. But mystery never truly sleeps. Davis returns with a warm smile. He thanks everyone for joining him tonight. He mentions the locket and the diary page that changed everything. Then he leans in gently. Tell me, he asks, which moment caught your attention first? And did you trust Miss Shaw or doubt her from the start? He lets the question settle. A soft farewell follows. Rest well, dear friends. Your company means more than you know. Then his voice lowers. Calm, steady, inviting. One quiet lane, one missing letter, one truth waiting. And the night closes.